Michael,
Hey,
we survived. We did
we
it.
did. A win's
Oh,
a win's a
man.
win.
I'm telling you. What's up, guys? Welcome to Plant the Spears post-game instant reaction show. Florida State gets a rather stressful 24-7 win on the road against Pitt. But you know what? Here's the thing, Michael. Everybody circled this as the trap game
They
going into
did.
the season. I think it was one of those where, you had a team that had nothing to lose.
Right.
Hats off, hats off to Pitt. They played. They really showed up ready to play today, and you got to give them credit. But I think it was one where you were down your two top targets on offense. You knew things could get a
Right.
little dicey there,
Right.
but at the end of the day, you get the win, man. You're 9-0, and you just punched your ticket to Charlotte
Yep.
for the ACC championship. So it was stressful, but it's an exciting time to obviously be a Florida State fan to earn that trip back to Charlotte. So give me some of your thoughts on this one, besides how stressful it was.
Yeah, you're right. It was it definitely had the nerves going, but you know what? Like you said, man, Florida State won the game. As I always say, a win is a win is a win, right? And they punched their ticket to the ACC championship game first since 2014. That's a big deal. So now goal number 1, which was to get to the game, has been accomplished. You were able to win the game. Yeah, you didn't have your top 2 playmakers on offense, and you've been without Johnny for the last couple of weeks, and then just surprisingly, right before kickoff, Keon is can't go. Not sure why. Not sure what's going on there, but I'm sure we'll get some form of an update in Mike Norvell's post-game press conference. But you know what? The defense, kudos to the defense. They played tough. They played hard. Yeah, they gave up a couple big explosive plays. I think 2. But man, Cypress with the punch out fumble recovery there prevented that one score, and then of course they got the other score on a well, it was aided by a personal foul penalty on Patrick Payton, but they did a great job. They held that terrible offense to pretty much 7 points is about what you expect of them. The offense, yeah, it took a little bit to get going, just kind of, they'd get started and then, something would happen and just kind of got in the way of themselves for most of the game. But when it mattered most, they were able to turn it on. They closed the game out on a 24-0 run after Pitt scored that 7. Pitt did not score again, and Florida State scored 24 straight points, unanswered points, to win the game, going away basically.
Yeah, I feel like with this one, the numbers don't necessarily tell the story of the score. That Florida State was really a little bit more in control, even though it looked bad. Like we were talking about this before the show. I feel like this game was worse than the Boston College game,
Yeah.
but they still ended, like you said, on a 24-0 run. And really, for me, when you look at the situation, when you look at how this game was presented, where you had a decent Pitt defense,
Yeah.
and you were missing 2 of your top playmakers, and then you had a pretty bad Pitt offense, and you had a good defense. So you felt good about that matchup
Yeah.
regardless.
Yeah.
You felt good that Florida State would be able to move the ball on this defense. And of course, they
Yes.
give up unfortunately, they give up their 30 game or their 30-point streak, 15 games. It does end. But I think that you'd have been more concerned if Pitt would have scored 20 points in this game,
Yes.
frankly,
Yeah.
because you can obviously, there are some things in this game that I think are concerning when you talk about this is probably the worst game that we've seen from the offensive line all
Yeah.
season. They really struggled to get run push today. There was some pressure on Jordan. But again, like I said, when you talk about not having your 2 top targets at receiver, and it's not like you're missing just 2 top targets. I mean, this is
Yep.
not like it's just anybody. I think when
Yeah.
they showed some stats on the sideline, it was almost 1,000 yards combined of receiving yards. So that's a
Yep.
really, really big deal. It's not like you're just missing any, Joe Schmo off the bench,
Right.
but you're able to overcome that. And once they really started kind of opening things up in the second half of this game, you started to feel a little better. You saw FSU do what they do. They out
Right.
depth some people.
Right.
And even though it was, and I do think when you talk about the wide receivers that did play, we talked about this as well. Destin Hill did not look fully healthy.
Nope.
So it's just, man, I think right now you still have a great receiving core, but they just got to get healthy. I mean,
Well,
they
yeah.
have to.
Yeah, they do. They really do. I mean, we have Miami coming up, so we definitely got to figure out what's going on there and see who we can get healthy. But you just think about this. Pitt coming into game, they thought they were going to have to like try to cover and bracket Keon, but with Keon out, basically Narduzzi and Code just decided, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to rush 6 for the majority of they were literally rushing 6 players for the majority of the game. They were sending, all their linemen and a couple linebackers here or there. And then they were playing man up on the out wide with the wide receivers. And so they were daring Florida State. They just assumed that Florida State would struggle to throw because they were not going to let Florida State run on them. And, the game plan worked for most of it. Trey finally broke off that 55-yard long run there after the Biscuit touchdown that came right after it. But for the most part, they only averaged 3.7 yards per carry on 37 carries. They tried to run Jordan early and he picked up a couple yards, but Jordan finished with 7 carries for negative 15 yards because of those 2 sacks that he took. Pitt, they were determined to not let Florida State run on them. They figured, hey, you got your B pass catchers. Let's see if you can actually throw on us. And I think FSU passed the test. I would give them an A, maybe not even a B on it, but they passed the test on the passing game, and they were able to pull out the win. So you got to take it where you can get it.
Yeah, and some people asked, like, why is Keon out? And we don't know. They don't release injury information at Florida State, so we really have no clue. A lot of us do kind of suspect that maybe it was a little bit of load management, like maybe not that they sat him because he couldn't play, but if he was a little bit banged up, maybe they gave him an extra week to rest. Maybe they didn't expect this game to be this close. We talked about in the pre-show that this was a survival Saturday. You saw Georgia struggle. You saw Ohio State get off to a really slow start against a Rutgers team that's decent. They're 6-3. But at the end of the day, like we were talking about, I think the thing that bothered you the most about this game was just that Pitt is 2-7 and they lost by 51 points last week. That, I think, is what makes you nervous. Now, again, you do talk about another solid performance from your defense, but it's just you need to see more from your offense. But we know the 2 playmakers are out because you got Miami coming up. You have Florida coming up. And it looks like Louisville now, after they beat Virginia Tech like a drum. It looks like that's going to probably be who you're playing. And that's a comment that we had in the comment section here. It says we still have 2 foes ahead and a little uneasy about potentially facing Louisville. And, Michael Nelson, who left the comment, I agree, man. I just think that like we talked about, when you look at how big of a part of this offense that Johnny and Keon is, and you would hopefully expect them to be back for the Miami game. You have to think with those 2 guys and this team, it's going to come heck or high water that these guys aren't going to play against Miami. So if you get them back, I really do think you're going to be okay. My biggest concern in that game, and we're still talking about Pitt before we kind of turn our focus to that game, but when you see what they did against this defensive line, Miami's got a really good defensive line. So you are a little bit worried there. But, at the end of the day, like we said, Florida State put up 501 yards of offense. And that's the thing. The numbers were crazy in this game because it felt like this one was a nail biter for the better part of 3 quarters. But then when you look at some of these numbers, like Jordan Travis, Florida State threw for 363 yards, 62% completion percentage. You ran for 138, which is about average for Florida State. And it was only 3.7 per rush, but, you had some sacks in there too. So they moved the ball. It was just it was the mistakes. And, we talked about beforehand, how do you let a team, this is what we said in our pregame show, how does a team like Pitt win this game? The same way they beat Louisville with mistakes. And what's Florida State do? Cough it up on the first drive. You get pinned on the 1. You go down 92 yards and you don't turn it into points. It just felt like we were in quicksand.
Well, yeah, you felt it from right at the beginning of the game. They get the kickoff, they're driving, and then just a regular run play, and the linebacker gets his hand in there, pops it out of Toafili's hand. There's a fumble. You're like, okay, we got a fumble now. Defense holds up. They get pinned back. Ja'Kai Douglas inexplicably lets a punt, gets just bounces for 25 yards to the 1 yard line. You drive 92 yards, right? You're there. You don't get it. You go for 4th and 2. Trey Benson slips on the play. Now, boom, right? And so you start to feel like, okay, Pitt has a little bit of momentum. Their offense isn't doing anything, but the defense is on the field over and over again. Then Pitt surprises you shockingly with a deep throw down the field. I think it was a flea flicker as well too. And they get the player, and if it wasn't for Cypress, that's a touchdown. Now you're upset 7-0. Then they score again. They actually really do score, and now you're looking at 14-0 in the second quarter, and you're like, what in the world? So kudos again to the defense for just really showing up today and playing. The like I said, Pitt had the best game plan it could have put together when it found out that Coleman wasn't playing, which was to dare Florida State to throw, knowing that the players that were going to be out there were players who have yet to be tested in a crucial game like that. I'm not saying they're bad players. I'm not saying that they're not worthy of being out there, whatever, but when Keon and Johnny are out there, that takes the focus off of them. They are able to make plays underneath. But when they actually become the primary targets, the defense, like the several jump balls that they threw up there, it was like Johnny and Keon come down with those more often than they don't. Well, Williamson, Ja'Kai Douglas, Portier, those guys are not coming down with those. They haven't shown that ability to do that yet. So, you tip your cap to Pitt for playing as tough as they did. Remember, we thought either they were gonna bank it in and they're gonna get blown out. They're gonna come out inspired, and they did. They came out inspired. They played tough for 2.5 quarters. They gashed Florida State when they could. But Florida State had the depth and the response. They responded very well to come back to win that game.
Yeah, they definitely did not quit on that team or that program. They were inspired. I was surprised. I was honestly surprised that they held in as long as they did, and they had not a great crowd, but they were into it at least.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
We have a comment here talking about how they need to do better if they get to the 4-game playoff, and I do agree with that. I think there may have been a little bit of look ahead to Miami here, maybe just a little bit. I think they know they need to take every game serious, but this is something that we have seen from them in the past where they do kind of play towards the next game. But I just think when you have those two top targets out, that it really does make that big of a difference, because when you talk about the play calling, and that was something that was in the comment here, it was like they kept throwing it to the outside with guys that couldn't win the same battles that we have seen Johnny Wilson and Keon Coleman winning all season long. I mean, sometimes it gets frustrating with this offense to just watch them chunk it up to the outside to their playmakers, but it works, and it works a lot. And then you had guys tonight. And the thing is, I think you have to keep in mind with these guys that you saw tonight, with these wide receivers, with Ja'Kai Douglas, with Destin Hill, with Portier, these are still really young guys. They do not have a lot of experience. They have not played a whole lot of football. And, that's something we talked about throughout the season, where you didn't get a whole lot of them in the game a lot. So it's hard to expect them to step up in a big moment like that. But it's something, because they're still young. They're going to have to get better. But this is why, if most of you guys remember, I did a whole podcast episode on why I think Florida State doesn't necessarily need to spread the ball around more when you have Johnny Wilson and Keon Coleman, because you have two really, really good receivers, and you want the ball in their hand. And I think in their hands, and I think that's what you saw tonight, was you just see the difference. I mean, you see the difference. It's not to say that any of those receivers can't be good in their career once they get some game experience and things like that. You just see the difference. You see why these two are NFL caliber receivers. And, anybody that is out. I mean, even if, like, I didn't get to watch the whole game, but I had it on my second TV, you still talking about Georgia, when they play Missouri, like, you can see the absence of Brock Bowers, and that's one guy. Imagine if you had two Brock Bowers that were missing. I mean, that would it would be killer for any team. So, yeah, man, it's just, you had some young guys. You would hope they stepped up a little bit better, but at the end of the day, you still found a way to get the win.
You found a way to win.
Right. And that's something that when we found out they were out, the thing I posted before the game was, this is one where defense should be able to carry the day.
Yes.
Like, you would be disappointed if you lost a 30-point streak. And of course they did. But you felt like with this Pitt offense and Florida State's defense, the way they have played against inferior opponents the last 4 to 5 weeks, you would have felt like holding them to 14 points was enough to win the game.
Yep.
Honestly, I
Yep.
mean, you wouldn't see.
Absolutely.
I would have thought if they can hold them to 14 points or less, Florida State's going to win the game, and the
Yep.
defense did. They held them to
Yep.
7 points, and sometimes you don't have to win the game 59 to 40 or whatever. Sometimes
Yeah.
you can win a defensive battle, and I think it shows that Florida State, as not great as it looks, but even though the score ended up gapping up a little bit towards the end, I think it shows that they can win relying on their defense. They can
Yeah.
win without some playmakers, even
Yeah.
if it was against a bad Pitt team.
Yeah, I just think, and I know everybody's worried. I mean, we are too, about, like, the beauty contest that is the college football playoffs, and them having us at 4, and they're just waiting for a reason to move us down. I get that, and so you wanted to have a dominating win, so you didn't give any excuses. But at the end of the day, had Florida State lost that game, it would have been a moot point, right? So the fact that Florida State won keeps us in the conversation, keeps us there for right now, at least. We'll see what happens with Washington and USC. But Chance wrote, he said about us needing to be better in the 4-game for if we make the 4-game playoff. And like you said, Jesse, I absolutely agree. But he also said, then again, he said play calling needs to be better. I'm sure we'll touch on that in a second. Defense needs to work on busted coverage. So that's the one I wanted to address. So I went back and watched it as you were talking there, Jesse. And the one play that I saw the busted coverage on was the play action that was in the second quarter, right at the top of the second quarter, where Fintrell punches the ball out at the end zone, before the end zone, to create the fumble. So that's a play action fake that the wide receiver splits the safety. So the safety, the Brown kind of bites on the play there, and then he gets back very quickly, but the receiver had already split the safety. So that's technically not a busted coverage. It's just a great play call. It was just a great play call.
Yeah.
Busted would have been had they just went down and he's wide open. He wasn't wide open there. He just made a great middle post in connection there. And of course, we recovered because Cypress chased it down and punched the ball out. So yeah, I really don't think you can fault anything on the defense today. They gave up a touchdown on a 8-yard fade route, but outside of that, this defense played lights out today. I mean, they kept them out of there. Pitt was 0 for 11 on third downs. 0 for 11 on third downs, right? They converted only 1 fourth down because Djokovic came in, and whatever his name is there, he came in and got the first down on a QB sneak there. But on the whole day, I'm actually really extremely proud of this defense. I thought they played phenomenal. The offense, again, having 2 people out, 2 of their key star wideouts out, you kind of give them grace for that. Some of the things, though, just were not up to par and where they need to be, for sure.
Right. And I think when you talk about the good of this game, obviously you feel good about the defense. You feel like this is the type of defense that now is in midseason form. I know, when I posted about this on social media, everybody was like, well, they haven't played any good offenses. Yeah, but they have pretty much shut them out. I mean, you're holding teams to almost no points. Now, I know they gave up some yards in this game. And again, shout out to Fintrell Cypress. Like, that is the DNA of a championship team, when you have someone who runs the guy down and forces the fumble. And it wasn't like it was luck, because you saw him punch the ball out. So it was a forced fumble. So, like, shout out to him for really turning the tide in that game. But yeah, man, like, the good is the defense, and you feel like they've hit that midseason form. They've shut down a lot of the bad offenses that they've faced, and you feel like now you have a defense that you can rely on.
Yep.
But I think the thing that you're worried about, and like you said, you give them a lot of credit. You grade on the curve to a large degree, knowing that they didn't have their 2 best wide receivers, which is, again, like we talked about, these are your 2 best players on the team. I mean, of course, Jordan's really good, but, without Keon and Johnny, I mean, like, he still threw for well over 300 yards, but I think the offensive line is going to be the one thing that might cost you when you talk about getting into the playoffs and playing a team like Georgia, or, someone who's got a really dominant defensive line. You might find yourself in a little bit of trouble there. But, overall, I do think, like, at least you were able to stretch it out a little bit towards the end. Like, I do think, as far as when you talk about the style points, just to jump back to that real quick, I think people will take into account that you did not have those 2 guys, because I think the nation, because of what they've done, I think the national media has picked up on Keon and Johnny, and they know how good they are. So they know how hard of a hit that is to your offense to not have those guys. So the fact that it didn't end up being, 17-7. The fact that you were able to win the
Yes.
game, like the
That's
game late in the
yes.
game, it was never in question. It
Yes.
was just off to a rocky start. I think as far as style points go, it would have been really, really nice to win
Yeah.
by 50,
Oh,
but
yeah.
at least it wasn't a nail biter like Boston College where you needed
Correct.
a little bit of help at the end. And when you kind of whip around the country, like we talked about, I mean, you had some tough games out there. Some people struggled. Oklahoma lost again. Washington right now is losing to USC 14-7. So that's really your biggest concern is Washington
Right.
kind of sneaking up on you there. But again, you also got Michigan, Ohio State that have to play, and Ohio State didn't look great today against Rutgers.
Yep.
They
That's correct. They
they pulled off
struggled.
late, but they struggled early, and then Georgia struggled. Of course, it was a ranked team, so
Right.
they at least played a ranked team in Missouri who's sneaky good.
Yeah.
But they struggled too, and they were at home. So I think
Yeah.
you I think you did enough. I
Yeah.
think you'll be okay. I think it looked ugly, but I think people will account for those two guys being out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna put anything, I'm not gonna assume I'm not gonna assume the best with the college football playoffs because they've already proven that sometimes asinine thinking makes itself into that room. So I would say that what should happen is that they should say, okay, Florida State was without Johnny Wilson and Keon Coleman. They're literally two top wide receivers, over 1,000 yards of reception, at least 100 catches. I don't know how many touchdowns that is, like 12 or 13 touchdowns. So for sure their offense was going to struggle some. And yet they still won 24-7. Right?
Yeah.
Now, they could have won more. They were down in the red zone once. They were driving, right? On the other before the 2nd and 6 score or the 2nd and 6 play call. They could have won more. They still won going away, 24 unanswered points. So we should not punish them for having those two people out. In the past, when I watched the college football playoff years ago when Florida State was in it, they gave credit to teams who were playing injured and still found a way to win the game. Now, let's see if they will allow that for Florida State as well.
Yeah, injured and on the road late in the season. And,
Correct.
I'm really just kind of hoping that Keon is just resting from Miami. I really
Well,
hope so.
I was going to say earlier is that there was a shot on the television copy where he was talking to a coach or a medical staff person, and he was like jogging in place, and he said I can go.
I thought he was going to come back in the game.
I thought he was going to come back after halftime. I thought
I thought he was going to have like a Bobby Boucher thing or whatever.
Yeah.
Like we show at halftime and the Mud Dogs win the Bourbon Bowl. Like I thought we were about to win the Bourbon Bowl. I was waiting for him to get back in the game.
I thought he was going to, I literally thought, man, this could be something where he comes back after halftime suited up and it's like, oh my goodness. But you know what?
I think I saw where like once you declare you're ineligible, you can't.
Okay, gotcha.
I think so.
But regardless of that, if it's just a minor thing and they held him out because like they're like, well, we just want to take a chance because maybe he got there because I saw a video of him walking in. He looked great. He looked fine. Yeah. And maybe putting on something he felt a little bit different. And they're like, let's not take the chance. They assumed they were going to win the game, because Miami is I saw somebody on X, right? The season starts now. Like this is a 3-game season now. You got Miami, you got North Alabama, and then you got Florida at home, who lost today in overtime to Arkansas at home. So this is the game. This is the season. You want to make the college football playoffs. It starts with this next game. You got to beat Miami.
Yeah, and I think if you have those two guys back, you feel good about it. I mean, I really do. I just think that had so much to do with this. And when you talk about Pitt, even, when you look at their quarterback against Louisville, we had mentioned this in the pregame, like it was he had a nightmare game against Notre Dame. But he threw for 300 against Wake. He threw for 203 touchdowns against Louisville. So like that offense had gotten better since they made the change at quarterback and they shut him down. So again, that next week's going to be so big. I mean, because again, you get them at home. We'll see how Miami does tonight against NC State. That could be tough because it is on the road. But like you said, I mean, you look around the country, Florida, we'll go ahead and talk about some games. So Florida lost to Arkansas, which I think is now a 3-win team. So, still in that dogfight for bowl eligibility for Bayou Billy and the boys.
Bayou Billy.
Trying to get in there. So always got to celebrate a Florida loss, of course. So they struggled. And then, like we said, I mean, if it's just one of those Saturdays where Georgia struggled. If, say, I know they're ranked, I know USC is ranked, but say they end up knocking off Washington, or Washington at least wins close, you'll probably stay put. It's probably a moot point at there. LSU is currently losing to Alabama at this time. So if they could pull that off, that would be a huge boost for your schedule. But the one game we haven't talked about yet that is really, really big for you is the Clemson win. And,
Yes.
it really kind of turned my stomach to have to want them to win, period.
It was hard,
But
but
just them beating Notre Dame like that was
yeah.
huge for you, for your resume, because you are now still the only team that has beat Clemson in Death Valley
at home, at their place.
Right. And I think it's like when you talk about a team that struggles, but then you talk about a team that is the way they are at home. They win as much as they do in Death Valley, that you can say that it's two different games. Like, it's two different teams that you're playing. And for them to beat a top 15 Notre Dame team, who, oh yeah, by the way, also happens to be the second best win for Ohio State. Now that makes your schedule look a little bit tougher. Now, I did see where Penn State absolutely waxed somebody. And so, like, that one, but the other thing with that is now that could be interesting when they have to play Michigan. And if Michigan's not cheating, then we'll see how that goes. Again, Oklahoma lost, so they beat Maryland. So, you just survive and advance at this point. This late in the season, sometimes it's just about surviving and advancing, because all it takes is one other team really to lose. And if you finish the season as an undefeated ACC champion, that Louisville team looks a little tough. They beat Virginia Tech by 31 points. So we'll see how that goes. But Virginia Tech, I will say, they're really good at home. They're really bad on the road. So
they were on the road. That's right.
So they have struggled on the road there. And so, like I said, we still got one more tonight to talk about, or to wait to see what happens. Oh, and by the way, shout out to Boston College.
Shout out to BC.
They are bowl eligible.
6-3. You believe that?
Right. They started out terrible, but I had said in my preseason that I thought they would be one of the most improved teams, and they would at least be able to make a bowl. So shout out to them. Everyone talks about how bad that BC is for your resume. Now, looking at the rest of their schedule, they'll probably only win one game, maybe two out of that. But still, you're talking about a bowl team, so at least that kind of does help. At least your closest game at least is now a bowl team. And yeah, man, I mean, Duke snuck one out against Wake Forest. Of course, their quarterback situation, they probably should have just rested Riley Leonard to start with against Florida State. So that's kind of went downhill there. But again, when you talk about resume boosters, like we said, the Clemson win was important. And then the Boston College reaching bowl eligibility, I think that helped. You got the win today it was comfortable and enough. It should have been better, but it's comfortable enough without the guys that you didn't have. And then we'll see how that Washington game turns out.
Yeah. I mean, look, like your Duke game, your Duke win, your Boston College win, those are two teams that are 6-3. They're bowl eligible. Clemson, beating, basically had the game in hand for most of the game against Notre Dame. I think at one point they were up like 28-7, I believe, at one point in the game. And so for Florida State just has to get healthy, has to win out. And, it starts with the Miami game. Yeah, they were up 24-6 really before the half was over. So those wins will look good. I think the committee, I hope they would give Florida State some credit for being the only team to go into Death Valley to win so far this season. No other team has been able to do that. So hopefully that'll give them some credit. Depends on how everything else shake out. At the end of the day, Jesse, you and I both, we agree that, look, they won the game. Like, you can't be in the argument unless you win the game. They won the game.
I know.
We survive another week. Let's get healthy this week and see what we can do against. Not see what we can do against Miami. Man, I was thinking previously, like, I wish this was like a 3:30 game because that allows me to get home either. Actually, it'd be great if this was a night game because that crowd is going to.
It would be unreal. And I think you're right. To touch on that first, like, you won the game. And I will be mad about a win all day long. That's perfectly fine by
yes.
Perfectly
I'd rather
fine
be mad about a win than sad about a loss.
Exactly, 100% of the time. And when you talk about Clemson, they have Georgia Tech left at home, so they could win that game. They get North Carolina at home. They
Yep.
ended up beating the mess out of Campbell, but it was tight there for
It
a
was
minute.
tight.
So
Yeah.
you think that they could win that game, and then they get South Carolina on the road. So you never know. I mean, Clemson could bounce back a little bit. They still didn't look great but they beat them without Shipley too. And then, when you talk about Miami, of course, we don't really ever want to see Miami winning
Nope.
anything. But if they do win tonight, not only do you have a good chance at that being a night game, but you're talking about a 7-2 Miami team. I don't know
Right.
that they would necessarily sneak into the rankings because,
Right.
their losses aren't great when you talk about Georgia Tech and whatnot. But I mean, it's still a 7-2 Miami team. They could sneak in at like 25th or
Right.
something like that. That's still going to count as a good win. If you talk
Yep.
about a team that's 7-2, a rivalry game, I think that will be a decent resume booster
Yeah.
there as well. And like you said, man, if that's a night game, like it's going to be insane. Like I think you're going to see Florida State. That's the thing, man. Like people want to talk about the beauty points and whether Florida. And I said, I'll be the first one to admit, I said in the first half that I thought they were a little flat when they came out. They looked
Oh
like
yeah.
they didn't get off the plane. Man, that
Yep.
Miami game is gonna be different. Like these guys, they're gonna be ready for that game, especially if it's a sold out. I mean, it's been sold out for what,
Right.
3 months,
Oh yeah. It's been
two or three.
sold out
Yeah,
forever. Yeah.
it's
The
been
thing
sold
you
out.
the thing you worry about is the opposite, right? So they come out, and I would agree. I think maybe a little like lethargic. Like I don't think they were looking ahead, but I do think the jarring of not having Keon, because that's jarring. That changes
Right.
the dynamic of the offense. I think the offense kind of came out, was like, whatever. We'll just try to figure this out. But then the other side of it is, now it's Miami week, right? You don't want them to be overly hyped that they try to play
Right.
out of themselves and hurt themselves. No, just go into the game. Mike Norvell has been, outside of his first year, he's been pretty good against rivals, except, he's 1-2 against Florida. No, because they didn't play Florida 2021. So he's 1-1 against Florida. He's 2-1 against Miami, right? Like, let's get to 3-1. Let's get everybody healthy. Let's focus. Let's come into the game.
And the one
Hopefully,
Miami game that he
he didn't even
lost, he
coach.
didn't even coach. He was sitting
Yeah.
on his couch just like
Yeah.
we were. So he
Oh
was he was
gosh.
playing NCAA with his controller off. Like, come on,
Get out the
Yeah,
field.
I
Yeah.
know. And so, like, yeah, man, I just think you got to be thankful that you won.
Yeah.
And yeah, man, it's just like when you talk about this Miami game, I really do think that they're going to come out. They're going to be hype.
Yep.
They're going to be ready. They know how big that game is. Period. Whether you're talking about 9-0 or 0-9 or whatever, they're going to
Yeah.
be ready for that game. And anytime you have Miami when they're semi decent, and again, I wish they go 0-12 every year, but
Right.
when they're semi decent, like that atmosphere is crazy because they will, Miami fans will show up a little bit. All 10 of them
Right.
will
Yeah.
travel and,
Yep.
and
They
show
will.
up. So
Yep.
it's going to be a fun atmosphere, and I know they're going to be hyped up for that game. But like you said, it's a 3-game season right now. You just got to win out. I mean,
Yep.
you're already in the ACC championship. That's the
That's
good
right.
thing. Is like no matter what happens, you are at least locked into your first goal. And that's what we talked about. Like you feel good too now because I mean, let's be honest, there's probably a 99.999% chance they're going to beat North Alabama.
Right.
So at this point in your season, you have punched your ticket to Charlotte. You have pretty much guaranteed double-digit regular season wins.
Yep.
So I know we've moved the goalpost now to want to make the playoffs and to want to, win a national championship. But
Right.
we said in the beginning that early
Yes.
in the season, what you really wanted to do was you really wanted to put yourself in a position to win the ACC
That's
championship
right.
and to
That
make a
was
New
your
Year's Six bowl game. And
that
you
was your
can put a
top
check.
goal.
Right, you can put a check mark into at least
Yep.
getting to the game. Now you're going to have to
Yes.
earn it against
You have to
Louisville,
earn
but
it. Yep.
but you have at least you're going to be in Charlotte. They
Yep.
cannot take that away from you. You're going to be there the first weekend of December for the first time since 2014. So
Absolutely.
you have to be thankful that you were able to survive and win. That next week nothing is like on the line of whether
Yeah.
you might or might not make it. You pretty much you guaranteed your spot, and now we'll wait to see. I mean, Louisville I think only has one or maybe two more ACC
Two.
games because I know they finished
Virginia
with
and Miami.
Kentucky. Okay, so we'll see how that one goes. I mean, you
Yeah.
would think, Virginia does kind of play some spoilers at times, but then
Yeah.
hopefully maybe they're probably going to beat Miami if we're being honest. So we'll see, man. But
We'll
yeah,
see.
I think it's at this point you kind of almost hope if you're going to play them anyway, you really would be okay with them winning out to try and be as highly ranked as possible because they're 13 now. So if you could catch them as a top 10 team, then like we talked about on our CFP rankings reaction show, you would now get that kind of gold star on the end of your resume before you sign
Yeah.
it, seal it, and send it off.
Yeah.
And when you talk about TCU, this was something that I was talking about with my brother earlier. It's like they had so many come from behind wins. They had so many close games and close calls last year, and they still put them in
Yeah.
at the end there. So I think
Yeah.
that Florida State, as long as you win out, you're going to be okay. And again, 24-7 wasn't what you thought it would be,
But
but
it's
it wasn't 13-7.
right. It's still a good score. You won going away. You scored 24 unanswered points. That Pitt offense was not doing much against your defense unless you helped them. So you take the win. You get out of there. You try to get healthy. The 3-game season starts right now. We worry about Louisville when you get to Louisville or whoever it is that you play in the ACC championship. You got goal number 1, which was to punch your ticket to the ACC championship. Check. Now, goal number 2, beat Miami. That's what you're focused on. That's what you want to do. Miami's down 7-3 right now. The NC State just scored a touchdown. There's 2 comments in the thing I want to address here real quick. Joey Eaker said, I think today maybe we thought that this would be easy game, but Pitt was looking to beat another undefeated team. They played hard. Good teams find a way to win. Go nose. Absolutely right, Joey. Good teams find a way to win. Mike Norvell talks about it all the time. Response. How do you respond when you get when things don't go your way, when circumstances change? How do you step up? How do you make the play to win the game? And the defense did, and the offense, when they had the chance to, they took advantage when they found their chances and they were able to do it. Tribal Chief said, I think we were talking about that we thought that Florida State would play better. He said, you don't know that. They may come out and look just like they did next week. Hope not. You're right. They can. That's possible. I doubt it at this point in time. I doubt that that Florida State's going to take Miami for granted. I don't think Mike Norvell and coaching staff will let them. But I mean, anything's possible. It's football. It's sports, right?
Yeah.
So any given what's the old movie? Any given Sunday, any given Saturday.
Anything is possible, but Mike Norvell talks a lot about these 2 games, and he doesn't like to mention them by name, but he always talks about these 2 games. So they know how important it's going to be, and I think they know how important every game is, but there could have been a little bit of, maybe peeking towards Miami a little bit because I do feel like that was a situation in the BC game where they peeked towards Clemson a little bit. Maybe, maybe I think, and I don't want to speculate because I don't know the extent of an injury or why he missed it, but I think if maybe Miami was this week and Pitt was next week, maybe Keon Coleman plays. Keon plays, and I don't
maybe
think that's
Johnny plays.
Right. I think that's a case on both of them. I do think that not so much that they took Pitt lightly. I think it was just more they felt good enough about what they could do on defense to be able to get by without those guys. And I thought maybe they thought the receivers that were going to step in would do a little bit better, but I still think you did okay there. And of course you still got Jordan at quarterback, so that helps too. But I mean, obviously you got some things to work on when you talk about the offensive line, but I think if you have those 2 guys back, it's going to be, plus when you talk about the offensive line and what they did in this game too, by not having your receivers, you're not on the same page with the same guys. So sometimes you may hold the ball a little bit longer, and that could have made things look a little, it just throws a lot off. It does, especially when you talk about how those 2 guys have played such a high percentage of the snaps, except for Johnny Wilson lately because he's been injured. But you got out of there with a win, and I feel like if it was necessary to do that to get them healthy for that 3-game stretch, I think that it is what it is because you're going to need them for those games. Like there's if you play like this against Miami or on the road at Florida, you're probably going to lose. So you need to play. You have to play better than that, and you need those 2 guys to win. But I think that's part of what when we talked about it before, where they know this is a potentially 15-game season or something like that. You know what I mean? So I think they're like, okay, if we can get the win and we can feel good about it, then maybe we can let these guys rest for the next half. Because I think when you talk about Miami and Florida, if you win those games, I don't think you have to blow those teams out because you get Florida on the road. Georgia blew them out, but it's a neutral site game. That's a rivalry game in the swamp. I don't think you have to blow those guys out. I just think you have to win.
Just got to win.
I think really, like we said, I think the only reason that you really feel bad about this game is because it was a 2-7 Pitt team right now. Like if this had been even a 500 team or something like that. You'd be like, okay, it was a hard fought win. It just,
Right.
you felt bad because you saw what Notre Dame did last week.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah. Absolutely. And Tribal Chief, yeah, he said, "Will you guys please address the O line non-run blocking?" Oh my goodness. Yeah. The the O line is what it is. We're 9 games into the season. This is what it is. Yes, I think everybody thought, even with the additions of Roddick from Colorado, and I can't think of the other guy. Was it Keon Jones? You thought maybe this would be a better offensive line for run. It just hasn't panned out that way. I mean, they're able to break a run here or there. They still got 138 yards running on 3.7 carries. But man, yeah, sometimes they just get whipped, they get blown up. What Pitt did this time was, when they realized that Keon and Johnny weren't going to be in the game, they literally just took their linebackers, their front 7, and rushed 6. I would say 75% of the game. And in that rushing of the front 6 or the front 7, they were attacking the A gaps. And if you know anything about football, the A gap is probably one of the most weakest parts of an offensive line, because you got the center there, and you come up the A gap, they're all thinking outward. And so what Florida State did is they started condensing some of that, which didn't open up some of that outside running as well too. So it was just it was the offensive line is what it's going to be. And Florida State, that's why Florida State, Mike Norvell, if you go back and look at his time at Memphis and Arizona State, and he was a former offense coordinator at Pitt, he is a run first mentality coach with his offense. But this year he has had to become a pass first. That this offense is a pass first offense that sets the run up later. And you saw that again today. They pass, sprinkle runs, pass, and then boom, finally Benson hits that 55-yard run, right? Because that is what's going to set that up. But when you don't have your star wide receivers out there and your backups are not catching the balls that normally your star receivers would do, man, the defense gets very confident. They start playing up higher. It is what it is.
yeah, I think that was part of it too, because you could tell. I mean, again, it's not only missing those guys throws off the pass game, like it's
Right.
complementary football. And
Correct.
that's something, like, I made a post on social media about how our pass defense was really good, and everybody's like, they got to get better against the run too. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, I get that, but if you could take away both aspects,
Yeah.
then like you would win the championship every year. So,
Correct.
when you talk about in this one, like not having those two guys, yes, it did affect the pass game, but it also affected the run game by what
Yep.
the defense was able to do, because
Absolutely.
they came in, like you said, they played a lot of one-on-one on the edges, and they brought the house a lot. They brought pressure
Yes.
a lot, and they knew when you didn't have those guys, they were going to make you try to throw the ball to win the
Correct.
game with guys that they felt they could do a good job against. So, yeah, man, I think those two guys, it's like not having the ultimate decoy, even if
Yeah.
it has nothing to do
Yep.
with the pass. Like, even if you let me play quarterback back there,
Yeah.
like as long as
Yeah.
you got Johnny Wilson and Keon out there, you better be worried a little
Yeah.
bit.
Absolutely.
But when you don't have those guys, I mean, the defense plays it completely different.
Absolutely. And this game just showed you how important Keon and Johnny is. Now, with Johnny being out, it showed you how important Keon is. With
Yep.
both of them being out, this is not, again, I mean, we're a pretty positive show. Like, this is not saying that Hill and Williamson and Douglas and Portier and even Ventress Jacobs, we're not saying that they're bad. Morlock and Bell and all those guys and Biscuit, we're not saying they're bad pass catchers. But the offense, Mike Norvell says all the time, this offense is built for playmakers. This offense is shaped around those two guys, and everybody else is complementary. But when you take the complementary players and put them in the star positions they have not been in all season, you have some of this, because now they're having to adjust to be where the targets. I mean, Ja'Kai had 116, I think he had 115 catches, or I'm sorry, 115 yards on 6 catches, but he was probably targeted like 10 to 12 times. Those targets are normally going to Johnny and Keon, not him.
Right. Right. You're asking guys to do something that they haven't had to do all season. And yeah, I mean, that's the thing. When you talk about even having like Johnny or Keon out there, you've seen where Keon has been able to step up in Johnny's absence,
Right.
but it's like you really need to have that
Yep.
other threat. It makes them not be able to double up or bracket coverage and things like that. And I do want to acknowledge real quick that Noleman67 said we're doing a great job. We
Yeah.
appreciate
Oh
that
man.
comment. Yep. And talking about too, that he also brings up a good point. The win over Pitt is good. I just can't help but wondering how the CFP committee
Yeah.
will
We
judge it.
talked about that earlier. Yeah.
I do think that is part of it when you talk about the style points that we mentioned before the game. I think you wanted, I mean, let's be honest, we thought this game was going to go about 45-10, but
Yep.
again, I do think when you keep in mind, like Georgia with Brock Bowers, everybody knows that they don't have Brock Bowers. Everybody knows that if he's back, that changes that offense. And it's no different with Florida State. I think they
Yep.
will understand that you were without your two best playmakers. But again, you also talk about Ohio State had that slow start. Georgia had the slow start, or
Yep.
really the tight game against Missouri. And then Washington, I mean, they're tied up with USC right now and they're ranked. I just think the worst thing about this one, when you talk about in the eyes of the playoff committee and things like
Yeah.
that, is just the fact that you had, and I won't even really call it a tight game. It was just a slow start of a game,
Yeah.
but you had kind of a tight game against the worst team of them all.
Right.
And so that's the hard part. But again, I just think when the nation knows about Keon Coleman. That's what
Yeah.
we talked about
Yeah.
earlier.
Yeah.
You know, you saw the Ohio State quarterback CJ Stroud shouted him out on game day and whatnot.
Yeah.
Everybody
Yeah.
knows like
Yep.
how big it is when you don't have him. So,
Right. Well,
you know,
and yeah,
and I
like
was gonna say, hopefully you get him back. Hopefully you get
right.
Johnny Wilson back. Hopefully we did see. We'll mention this. I think we mentioned it in the pre-show, but we didn't bring it up here. Jordan was looking at his leg late in the game.
Yeah, he was kind of
Hopefully he's
limping. Yeah.
yeah. Hopefully he's okay. If you get Florida State's offense back next week and everybody's healthy and that's not anything to worry about there with Jordan, I think you're fine.
Yeah.
I really do think you're fine. I just
Well,
think those guys being out are such a big hit to this offense.
yeah. And just like Justin Irvin said, like Justin, we hope that the committee would understand having your starters be out and be unhealthy, that they would take that in consideration. But as you probably know, sometimes they make decisions that not even aliens of another world would understand. I just think that that again, this team, they came out, they did their job, they won when they won the game. Yes, it was close. Yes, they came out a little lethargic. Yes, it wasn't what we thought that the score should be, but they won going away. They scored 24 unanswered points. They dominated the majority of the game. Pitt went 0 for 11, had 3 turnovers, 2 fumble loss, 1 interception. And the offense, outside of just like, and the thing is, this is the best part about it, is that the thing is that it wasn't like glaring mistakes. It was just little things. Offensive line could get beat across their face on one thing. The Pitt's defense is rushing those A gaps, sending 6 people all the time, and we're not getting adjusted correctly. Drop balls. Pitt has some good DBs. Let's just be honest about that. So, at the end of the day, a win is a win is a win, and you can't be too unhappy about it.
Yeah, and I think when you talk about Pitt's defense was the best part of that team naturally.
Yep.
And when you talk about Florida State still won 24-7 when you were going without your 2 best playmakers on offense against a decent defense, like we talked about
Yep.
in the preview. They were pretty middle tier, upper third, 40s to 50s on defense. So it was not a bad defense. And then you didn't have your good playmakers on, or your top playmakers. You still had some good playmakers in there, obviously, but
Right.
you didn't have your top playmakers on offense. You still put up 24 points and you shut down a really bad offense. And
correct,
like we talked about, I think that the biggest negative is because Pitt's 2-7, but at the same time, you also had, I mean, I don't want to call it a gutsy win on the road because, it's a 2-7 Pitt team that just got beat by 51 last week, but you went on the road with adversity at your back and you were able to get it done. You passed that little bit of a test there. You were able to show that you could win without your 2 top receivers.
Yep.
Obviously, people see that you struggled, so you need those 2 guys, but at least it's not like, like we talked about before, it's not like Florida State is built off the back of one really talented guy. I mean, you had some people that were able to get it done. And frankly, if you had to have those young guys in a scenario, this was probably the one you wanted them in. I mean, you probably didn't want them to, if something were to happen injury-wise, hopefully not, knock on all the wood,
Yeah.
You wouldn't want those guys to come in straight off the bench against a Miami or Florida. So at least now you had a game with them.
Correct.
They can go back and watch film, and hopefully those guys just get healthy there. And yeah, talking about the biggest positive here by Justin was Ja'Kai Douglas. And man, it was kind of the Ja'Kai Douglas show. And I think people forget like how much of a weapon he is. And he did miss a lot of time with injury. So again, this is another player that
Yep.
he's not young, like when you talk about Vandrevius Jacobs and all that. But he still hasn't played a whole lot this year.
Right.
And I think another big loss too was you didn't have Hakeem Williams either. Like
Yep.
we really didn't even mention that. If you'd had
Yeah,
him,
that's right. I didn't even think about that. Yeah, that's
that's
right.
another really talented receiver that you could have had there as well. So, and when you talk about how Notre Dame put up over 50 points on them, well, they also had 4 interceptions last week
Yep.
too. So
That's true.
that
That's how
definitely
they
did
put
help.
up for tribal chief. That's how you put up 50 points on somebody. You take the ball away, 4 times, an interception. And at the same time too, like that's a different pretty sure that game was on the road, right? Pitt was at Notre Dame, or were they at Pitt?
I think they might have been. Hang on,
At Pitt.
I think they might have been at Pitt.
Okay. Well,
No, they were at Notre Dame. Yep,
yeah,
they
so
were
they're at
Notre
Notre Dame. That's a home game. They're at home. They got 4 interceptions. That crowd's behind them. I guarantee you, if the
And-
same situation happened and Pitt was at Florida State and we didn't have Keon and Johnny, we'd still probably score 45 points. But it's a different atmosphere. It's different. You're on the road. It's 60 degrees. It's a little cold. It was cloudy for most. I mean, it was sunshiny and then it was cloudy really, and then it got dark. Like, I mean, there's so much of that. We're not making excuses for them. I know it sounds like we are. We're not making excuses for it. I'm just saying it is possible. If you switch the thing, if Notre Dame was there at Pitt, I wonder if they score 50 points. They might score 30,
Well, and I think too, if you had Keon Coleman and you had Johnny Wilson, I mean, you put up 24 without and it's not like these are your 2 top receivers like this.
Right.
These are your
Yeah.
2 top receivers.
Yeah, there's
Right. Like
margin.
exactly. Like if you put them back in this offense, you probably win this game 45-7. You probably win this game 51-7. Like
Right.
it's just that's probably how it works because you have 2 really dominant players there. And so, that's how I think that's what I think could have happened, the final score if you'd had those 2 guys. Because I mean, let's be honest, a lot of those plays that they threw, the ones that you normally see Johnny Wilson or Keon, it's not that it wasn't there.
No, they were there.
Right. You just have normally those are 50-50 type balls that you have 2 NFL caliber wide receivers that can go up and get those. And these guys just aren't there yet. They could get there in their career. But anytime you're missing 2 NFL wide receivers on the outside or caliber wide receivers, and you see those plays, they were there. The guys didn't make the play on the ball. So yeah,
and the other thing is, like Noel Man 67 said, like the thing we're also forgetting is that even after all of that, after having your 2 NFL caliber wide receivers out, Jordan Travis still threw for 360 yards, had a 63 long catch, was 22 of 36, had a touchdown. Was responsible for 2 touchdowns, a passing touchdown to Biscuit that was on a busted play, and then also the rushing touchdown. Like, he still threw for 360 yards with his 2 NFL wide receivers out, right? And when you're throwing the deep ball against, I don't know how tall Ja'Kai Douglas is. I think he's like 5'9", 5'10", whatever. And the DB 6'2", 6'1". Of course, he's going to get up there and knock the ball down when normally Keon Coleman is doing that. When normally Johnny Wilson is doing that. I thought Portier did not play an exceptionally good game. He had chances. I thought, obviously, Destiny Hill, he's still banged up. You could tell he was not 100%, especially on that crossing route that he got there. Normally he is like one of the fastest players on the team, and he slowed up because he knew he couldn't run as much as he wanted to. So I thought that. I thought Jacobs got in there and did some things well and some things not. I thought Kyle Morlock was okay. I just thought my gripe, if I have any gripe about the passing game, was that I thought, okay, with your 2 star wide receivers out, your tight end should eat in this game. And I didn't think we targeted the tight end as much. I have to go back and watch the tape to see what Pitt did to try to take that away. But I thought that they should. I thought Bell and Morlock should have ate today. Now Morlock was 4 catches for 80 yards. Bell was 5 catches for 23 yards, and then of course Biscuit, Marquise, and Douglas had 3 catches for 41 yards and the touchdown. So I mean, combined they were all right, but I just thought, man, there should have been so much more to that.
Yeah, and I was just looking it up real fast, and I know it's only by 1 yard, but this was actually Jordan's highest passing yardage of the season so far,
Mm,
and he did it without his 2 best wide receivers.
mm.
So it just goes to show you that we know with this offense sometimes it doesn't really look the way you want it to. It just never
Yeah.
does.
Yeah.
But when you ask about would we like to see Jordan run more RPOs, I think they could have moved the pocket a little bit better in this one.
Yes, I thought so
That
too.
was
Yes.
Yeah, that was really one of my biggest complaints in this one because the offensive line really allowed a lot of pressure in this one, and I think that was one of my biggest complaints here. And I did want to mention this. No Man 67 brings it up. I'm glad he did because I almost forgot. Man, that throw that Jordan hit Ja'Kai over the shoulder.
Oh
I
gosh.
mean, that might have
That's
been one
beautiful.
of the best throws that
Yep.
he has had all season. And so, like, again, it wasn't all ugly. It's just
No.
you saw. I think that the thing about this offense is they've become accustomed to those certain types of shot plays
Right.
that they're used to their receivers coming up with. And it looked like maybe they thought they'd still be able to win those battles with Portier
Yeah.
and Ja'Kai Douglas, and they just weren't able to do it. And
Right.
that's fine. And then, like you said, I mean, Destin Hill, he's obviously still not healthy. We know he's missed a lot of time with injury this
Yeah.
year. And when you know the speed that he has, and you saw that crossing route that he hit, and he was
Yeah.
just it wasn't there.
He wasn't there. Yeah.
They just it's not even like the guys that they were playing with were completely healthy because Portier missed a lot of games
Correct. Yep.
with some health issues too. Now, I will acknowledge there. Justin said that Vandrevius Jacobs probably should have got a few more reps. I think so too, man. After all we heard about in the spring, I thought he was going to be a guy that had a bigger role. But again,
Yeah.
I think the thing is we don't really get to see practice, so we don't know how
Well,
it looks. You know what I
yeah.
mean?
Well, I'll tell you this. There was a comment Mike Norvell made, and he's every time Vanjarius Dre, I'm gonna call him Dre. Every time Dre Jacobs gets brought up, Mike Norvell has this little quip about him. Like he says, he's still working, he's got to figure things out, blah, blah, blah. And then he has like a little smile. And I started to assume, like, okay, so this is not literally about his skill, this is about his maturity, his attitude. Yep. And that became that became solidified to me when he was walking off the field. I think after that targeting hit that he got, he's walking off. I think they're going to take him to the back to check for a concussion or whatever. And he's got his helmet off, and he comes around. The TV cameras catch him, and he looks up at a fan and he flips him off live on TV. I actually rewound the TV just to make sure, and I'm like, he just flipped this dude off. Like, yes, that's why he's not playing as much, because I'm sure they're going to see that, and he's going to get punished for that.
And Mike Norvell's big on that type of stuff. I mean, you saw where they had the blow up with Deuce Spann and things like that, that was another thing that was that I thought was a little odd. I thought maybe we'd see some Deuce Spann at receiver on some end rounds and things like that. I'm surprised that didn't happen either. It was a strange game overall, I think. But at the end of the day, like you said, you knew that you were down some guys, and Mike Norvell's big on that maturity level too. So you're going to see some guys. I feel like, again, if you just have to keep in mind that they didn't have the 2 most important weapons on this team, but you saw some guys get some experience, and we know that, again, when you talk about Destin Hill, that's a young guy. When you talk about Vandrevius Jacobs, that's a young guy. You talk about some of the guys that Ja'Kai Douglas hasn't played a whole lot this year. So again, you're leaning on guys that have not played a lot in big time situations when the game was kind of on the line, and it wasn't late in the game, but early on it was. But I do think it was nice to see Florida State wear down Pitt, because that's something that you want to see with this team. Like they've been able to do that all season long, and it's been nice to see them. Even we know the first halves have been frustrating.
Didn't even play. I just looked on the participation; he didn't even play.
Yeah, and I didn't even I didn't see him out there on kick return either. And that is the other thing to touch on too. Something that really hurt Florida State in this game, when you talk about not having Keon Coleman in there as well. Like, immediately see where he is more important than a
Yes.
wide receiver,
Yes.
because it wasn't even so much, I had mentioned in the pregame preview that they had given up 2 touchdowns on punt returns this year. They were also like 132nd out of 133 teams in punt return yardage allowed per game. And we had probably the worst punt return outing of the season this year, with
Oh,
just so much lost yardage by not even like that we didn't have a good return. We just didn't catch the punt.
didn't even catch the punt.
And you put yourself in bad field position multiple times with that. So yeah, man, I just think it's I
378 yards of lost yardage.
what's that?
Of
Yeah,
punting. They punted 9 times, had 378 yards. Like that, like when you break that down by the punts, I mean, his average was 42 yards. He had 3 go inside the 20, all got whatever, and 2 50-plus yard punts.
everybody's special teams is just ridiculously good against us. I don't
It just
freaking get
doesn't
it.
make sense.
Yeah, and people talking about the flea flicker call. Yeah,
Uh,
I didn't like it. I
the
really
second
didn't.
one,
I really didn't. The first one wasn't terrible, but it was really kind of slow developing. It
it
just
was. Yeah.
and I do think the thing is too, like, the offense did look a little bit off tonight. Things looked to develop really
Yeah.
slowly. And then, when you talk about trying to run a trick play with an
Yeah.
offensive line that really couldn't block well, so you didn't
Yep.
really have much time for things to develop. But the second flea flicker play, I mean, it was
Well,
like,
it just didn't make any sense. Florida State was on the I looked it up. Florida State was on the Pittsburgh side of the ball. I think they were on the Pitt 32 or something like that. It's 2nd and 6. You just had this nice run coming off the interception there. You had this nice run. You're on Pitt side of the ball. It's 2nd and 6. Why not run the ball or run a
yep,
simple pass play? Why get cute there, like you said in the pre-show? Why get cute there on that play call? Like, why? Like, and this is now you know me, Jesse. I am the biggest Mike Norvell fan out there. I love Mike Norvell. I love his offensive genius. I love it. I
yeah,
love it. I love it. But there are moments that he has shown over these 4 years where it'll just be inexplicably, he's playing Madden, and he called that play, and I'm
yeah,
like, what are you
yeah,
doing here? You've got the
yeah.
momentum. Run the ball or throw an easy pass play. Do not try this flea flicker that now gets blown up, and Jordan takes a 17-yard sack for that. Like, no, man, you don't need that.
I know it seems like sometimes where it's like, Mike, you just need to draw a line A to B. That is
A to
it.
B, A to
A to
B.
B. That is all we need to do. We need 4 yards, and it'll be like, all right, so what we're going to do is we're going to throw it backwards, and then we're going to toss it to the left, do a triple reverse, and throw it downfield, and then kick a drop kick punt field goal. And it's like, man, just run the ball.
Just
Like,
run the
bring
ball.
in DJ Lundy as fullback, bring in like Marquiston at tight end,
Yeah.
bring in an extra offensive lineman. Like, I love the ones where they bring in like Robert Cooper as the
Yes.
fullback or something, like bring me a heavy set. Now,
Yes.
I have to also couch that with your offensive line has not done well with the run push this year. So that
Yeah.
is
Oh my gosh.
something
Yeah.
that you kind of have to deal with there too. But I do think when you talk about some of the RPO stuff and what they're doing, when we talked about moving the pocket, I think that Jordan did use his legs a little bit tonight. We did see that the runs weren't very
Kind of.
successful, but
Yeah.
it feels like a strange way that they use his legs sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, it feels like Jordan is most effective when you kind of roll him out a little bit, and then he's either going to throw it downfield, or when things break off, he's got a lane and he can
Yep.
make a run for 30, 40 yards. It seemed like he was trying to run it a little bit too much up the
Yeah.
middle in a crowded line of
Well,
scrimmage area there. And I think they could have done it a little
yeah.
bit smarter there. But again, you talk about an offense that did move the ball over 500 yards.
Yeah.
So
I'm just
they
not
were
sure.
moving it.
They were moving it. I'm just not sure. Like, I've given up on trying to figure out why the read game is not more of a thing for FSU this season, because and when it is, it's like, because it feels like almost, I would guesstimate. So guys, I'm just guesstimating, but it feels like 90% of if it is a read call, it's a give. Like, he's always giving.
Yep.
There were like 3 or 4 times on the replay on a running back would get, stopped behind the line of scrimmage. That I'm like looking at, I'm like, if that was a read, Jordan has a wide open lane there.
Yeah.
Why does he not take that? What is he doing there? And so I'm not sure if it's like, okay, this is just all gives, and then like we'll change it up. Like in the Duke game, he started reading it
Right.
and keeping it and going. So I've stopped. I've told myself I can't get frustrated at that anymore. It doesn't make sense. He has 7 carries for negative 15 yards today. 5 of those were actually run plays. That didn't really get much yardage. And it wasn't as if Duke was, it wasn't as if Pitt was like keying in on him. Actually, they were so concerned with shutting down the traditional running game. I felt like he could have got more, but also too, at the end of the game, you saw him limping. And so you're like, oh, maybe it was a good thing he didn't run as much. So I don't know.
Yeah, I do really think the thing with him not running is a health thing. I really just think it is. I think from being banged up over his career, having to miss some time, I think,
Right.
like we've mentioned 100 times on the show, the best ability is
His
availability, and I think he
availability.
wants to be available. I do think when you talk about Jordan, you want him at quarterback, maybe carrying the ball 3 to 4 times a game more than you want him carrying it 10, 15 times a game and
Correct.
risk not being at quarterback.
Right.
He's that important because, again, you can talk about how Tate could come in and probably do well when you have a guy like Johnny Wilson and Keon Coleman to throw to when you have that duo. But now you talk about Jordan threw for 360 yards without either one
Yeah.
of those guys. So you have to respect what he's able to do
Yep.
at
Yep.
quarterback when he can
Yep.
throw for more yards than he has all season without his 2 top guys. So you
Yeah.
want him at quarterback. I think it is a health thing. I think he's been banged up a lot, this year with the arm injuries and stuff like that. I think he's trying to protect himself.
Yeah.
But like you mentioned in the Duke game, when he does keep the ball, it completely changes
Yep.
the game, this offense. But I also think with this one that when you talk about Jordan, he is the best runner you have on the team, flat out.
Yep.
I mean, he is. He's the most dynamic. He's the fastest. He's one of those guys where you just need to find a way to use his legs, even if it's not on like a designed run. I think it's where you need to be able to let him move the pocket when your offensive line is struggling, because I mean, right now they kind of are. And you talk about some of the transfers. You mentioned Casey Roddick. He had a rough night. He was
Right.
probably the one of the worst ones out there tonight. And I mean, it's not like they're not trying, but I mean, it's just you have some issues there. And
yeah. And I think it was Tribal Chief that asked. Yeah, he asked us what we thought about the 4th down call. There was only one 4th down. They didn't get it. I thought it was a great call, actually. If Trey doesn't trip there, it's a 1st down. It's probably a little bit more than 1st down. It's probably a touchdown. But he trips up there and the guy comes in to play. Obviously the analytics say go there. Would you have liked the 3 there? Maybe, but at the end of the day, it didn't hurt you. I think if the game was much closer, you might have might have regretted going for there. But Mike Norvell, that's his MO. I've learned very quickly, like if it's your MO, fine. Do it when you're supposed to do it. Now, I forget what game it was 2 games ago when they went forward on their own side of the field. I thought that was a terrible 4th down call. Yeah, against Duke. We should not have done that. But you're in the red zone there. Yeah, you would like the points, but you go for it. Mike has always been aggressive as a play caller there. And plus you trust your defense that, because it's deep there, that they're not going to be able to score. And of course they didn't. They ended up, I think it was a 3 and out on there, and they ended up punting on that. So
I knew they were going to go for it as soon as they didn't get it on there. You knew that close. And I really do think it was a little bit of trying to get the points, like kind of deliver an early blow without your receivers. Like if you could get a lead on them. But I do think the only argument that I will say that people said that I understand is when you don't have your receivers like that, and your offense, points may be at a premium in this game. But like you said, at the end of the day, it didn't cost you. You didn't do something crazy like you were way on your side of the field. Like you felt good about what your defense was able to do. So like you said, it's his MO. It's what he does. And I mean, I love the aggressiveness. Someone said, brought up in a comment, Justin brought up about how running from the shotgun is, hey, look.
I was just going to say, go ahead, say what you say.
I hammered him already. I hammered him about this earlier in the season. And then we joked that maybe he watched the show because it was like a game or 2 later. Yeah, they went for it and it wasn't in the shotgun and they didn't get it. So I was like, I guess I'll just be quiet then. I guess I'll stop talking. But I'm the same way, man. I just it kills me to take a 4th and short and make it 4th and longer by doing it in the shotgun. I'm big on heavy packages. That's just me. Like I love a spread offense and air it out and things like that. But I'm all for like an Iowa type of offense on fourth and short.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, man. I trust me that that fourth and short from the shotgun. I came after
the
him about that one a few weeks ago, but
yeah,
then he proved me wrong. So what
he
am I supposed to
did.
do?
I hate I mean, I don't like going for 4th and 1s, 4th and 2s from a shotgun. It makes no sense to me. At the same time, I also understand like this is not a this is not a bulldozer offensive line. They're not going to
Yeah.
push. They're not on a regular basis going to consistently push guys off the line to get those easy 1 to 2 yards. And so you got to be a little creative. Can you be creative coming from under center? Yeah, I think you can. I think you give yourself more of a shot, but hey, I'm not in practice every day with those guys, so I trust Mike Norvell to know what is best for that team when they go on that.
Yeah,
Tribal,
I was gonna say some of those I don't love anyway. Like I think it was the one where I hammered them over it. I forget it was a couple games ago where they ran fourth and short from the shotgun and they basically just did a draw up the middle to
yeah,
Benson.
yep,
I think if you're gonna run it from the shotgun, you could get more creative. You could let Jordan's legs be a run threat where
yep,
you
yep,
like an RPO on the edge because he is
yep,
a dynamic runner. You could maybe get a tight end out there in the flat or something like that.
yes,
I
yes,
think
yes,
you can still run fourth down and out of the shotgun. That's fine. But I do think that you could have done it a little bit differently. I think
yeah,
the play choice could have
yep.
been run out better out of the same formation.
Yeah, yeah. Tribal Chief asked about our take on the bottom up screenplays early on in the game. Gosh, Mike Norvell usually calls about 3 to 5 screens every game. He called this allotment of screens very early. I think it was like 3 calls in the first quarter and a half of screen calls. And early we hit them. I think Rodney Hill had a long one. There was another one with Biscuit that got a couple yards. There's another one a little bit later. And then what Pitt said is like, oh, again, it's the same attitude. Pitt said, you are not going to hit these behind the line of scrimmage passes. We're going to come up on you. We're going to blitz 6 people, right? Which interrupts the screen. Well, blitzing should help your screen, but when they're blitzing, but they're also keying in on the running back to check to make sure he's not going to screen call. They were adamant. The way you're going to win this game is by hitting us over the top. So I don't think that's a issue going forward because I don't think a lot of teams play. Pitt plays this really weird quarters coverage, but it's like man, and so it makes it easier for them to come and hit those attack those screenplays, and so.
And they made some plays. Like
They made plays
their
exactly. Number
linebackers made
30,
plays. Like
yeah,
I know, like, and that's really the thing that you got to remember is I know Pitt has not been great. I get it, but they made some plays.
yeah.
Narduzzi is a really good defensive coordinator.
I think that's the thing.
He's
You're
not their
right.
DC, but you know what I mean. He's
But
a defensive minded head coach. He's a
yeah,
former Broyles Award winner. Like that's why we talked about in the preview that we thought they would shut this offense down, but we thought their defense could be.
yep.
Their defense isn't terrible.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. The defense is not terrible. The thing is, like, you knew, well, you could assume, I think we talked about this on the prediction preview show, is that, you knew one of 2 versions of Pitt was going to show up. Either the team that basically quits or the team that shows up somewhat inspired and tries to make this a game. Well, you take the somewhat inspired, tries to make this a game, compounded on the fact that your 2-star wide receivers are out, compounded on the fact that you have offensive linemen that are still coming in and out of the game, compounded on the fact that it's at Pitt. And yeah, it makes for a sloppy, almost 3/4 of a game. But when it mattered most in those middle 8 minutes, right? We talked about the middle, we haven't talked about it on the show, but those middle 8 minutes they talk about in football, right? Towards the end of the first half and the beginning of the second half, Florida State did what it needed to do. It scored 24 unanswered points. The defense got stops when it needed to get stops, kept them out of the end zone for the majority of the game. This is a gritty win. This is a gritty win when you're banged up, right? And yeah, like Noel Man 67 said, to Pitt's credit, their defense played up today, right? It's easy to play inspired football, especially when you have the number 4 team coming into play, right? You come in jacked up, you're trying everything. Your coach is unleashing you. They unleashed that defense, man. They're blitzing, like I said, almost 75% of the downs. So it makes sense that some of this happened.
Yeah, and when you look at the advanced metrics that I got pulled up real quick here, their defense is 40th in advanced metrics. So their offense is just 93rd. That's
Right.
what really puts them in a tough spot. And, even when you talk about Notre Dame last week, I mean, their quarterback, Pitt's quarterback, gave Notre Dame 4 extra possessions. Now, I
Right.
know you had some turnovers too, but anytime you give them that many swings, that many at
Right.
bats,
Right.
they're gonna score. And so,
Yep.
like, this is the 40th best defense, and then you also had your 2 top playmakers out. So, yeah, man. Again, I am a firm believer. I will die on the hill that if you had your 2 top receivers in there, you'd have probably put up the better part of
Yep.
35 plus, close
Yeah.
to
Oh
40
yeah.
points. And I
I
will
believe
say
it.
that to Justin's comment here, Miami next week, right now they currently have the 28th opponent adjusted defense. So you're going to be in for more of a challenge next week. But again, you think that they would have those 2 guys back. I think that's a lot of it.
Yeah.
And again, like we talked about, there was some things that were there on
Yeah.
those deep shot plays. They were there. You just got to have your wide receivers that can go up and win those. And
Yep.
I know they may not be high percentage plays that maybe you should have run something differently when you didn't have those guys, but you're also used to having an offense that can go win those
Right.
plays. So,
Right.
maybe you think your guys can go do the same thing, and they could. And then, when you talk about the comment that we have here about, do you think that Pitt defense made plays because of our poor execution? I think it was a little bit of both. I think, again, you have to figure in that they had guys that they were out of sync. They just weren't on the same page early. They looked like they were. It just, man, there was so many little mistakes. There was
Yeah.
so many little things with the fumble and all that. Like, you started out, your first drive was a
Yep.
turnover,
Yep.
and then you got pinned at the 1-yard line. Like, you put yourself repeatedly in bad situations.
Yeah.
And so I think you kept Pitt alive. Like, you
Yep.
kept them. You kept them in the game, and it gave them life. And you had a defense out that, like we talked about against Louisville. Keep in mind, this is the team that beat Louisville, who's the
Right.
13th ranked
Right.
team in the country, and just blew out
Exactly.
Virginia Tech. Like,
That's right.
Louisville made mistakes, and they beat them. Florida State made some mistakes, and it got them in the game. Luckily, Florida State was able to correct those mistakes and then kind of pull off towards the end there.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm laughing at Tribal Chief's comment. You say pretty, define pretty. J-Lo or Megan Fox?
I don't know if it was that pretty. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. But
Uh,
again, I do think when you talk about the overall win, like, people will, the committee's supposed to watch the games. So they will
supposed to.
see the slow start. They're supposed to. They
Yeah.
will see the slow start. They will know that you did struggle a little bit against Pitt. But I do think, again, we've said this before, they will take into account that you were without your 2 top playmakers. You were on the road, and you still won 24-7. So again,
Right.
it's not like it was extremely close. And, to kind of swing around, you still Michigan, number 3 Michigan against 2-6 Purdue. They are currently up 20-6 at halftime. So,
Yep.
maybe that sign stealing stuff had a little bit of something to do with it there. And then you talk about Washington and USC. Apparently,
Oof.
nobody's playing defense in that
Nope.
game, 35-28 at halftime. So,
Washington was able to get a fumble. That's why they got that. That's why they're up by 35 because they got a
okay.
fumble.
And
So
then at LSU, Alabama are tied at
I
halftime, 21-21. So again, I think too, when you talk about, as we get ready to kind of wrap this thing up, because I got to get going here in just a little bit, but when you talk about, and NC State is up 7-6 over Miami right now, but when you talk about today, you still won the game by 17 points. So you
yep.
still won by 3 scores. And then you also have Clemson gave you a big resume booster
Yes.
today. And then if LSU can win tonight,
Yeah.
then that's a big resume booster. And screw Miami, I hope they lose, but if they
Yes.
do end up winning, well, one, hopefully, you get a night game out of that.
Yep.
And
That'd
then
be nice.
two, again, a 7-2 Miami team coming in a rivalry game. If you win that game by 10 points, you're still going to get pretty good credit for it.
Right.
So
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. It's just, it's important for everybody out there to understand that a win is a win is a win, right? We won the game. We able to get out of there, no major injuries, hopefully Jordan's okay. I saw Verse came back in the game. We'll see, we'll check on, or we'll figure out what's up with Keon and Johnny and Van Javis Jacobs, who was injured there, and Feely too. He left the game during halftime. I don't know if he came back in, but we'll see. We'll get something this week on from Mike Norvell and them and see where they are. But hey, you won. Let's get back to Tallahassee. Let's get healthy. Let's prepare for a great game. And if
Yep.
you're a Florida State fan, you're going to be at that Miami game at Doak Campbell Stadium. Show up loud, show up early.
Yep.
I know Jesse will be there. I'll be there. Come find us. We'd love to say hi, meet you. Hopefully, we're celebrating a win. And yeah, it's going to be great.
Yeah, hopefully. And someone said that they NC State's in the red zone right now. Tyler Van Dyke so far 6 of 16 for 68 yards and 1 interception. So
Come
again,
on.
you feel like you should be able to do some things, and Justin said he's going to be at that game as well. So
Yes.
speaking of, guys, as we get ready to wrap this up, so we will be back. Of course, we're going to be back with shows next week.
Yes.
We're gonna we may try to follow up on this a little bit more. We're going to do a Miami preview. I did go get a parking pass for Lot 14, which is the intramural fields in front of the stadium, kind of like sandwiched between Madso and the stadium. So we will be tailgating there if you guys want to drop by. It's kind of chaotic to figure. I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to like have a bat signal for people, because last time it was like really hard to get people over to our direction. So I'm going to figure all that out. I'll let you guys know before we go, but you are more than welcome to come by. I would love to meet you guys to come by and say hi. Michael, we're going to get him to come over there. We got some other guys that are going to be showing up from the FSU community. So it's going to be a fun time. And, Michael, it is the best week of the year.
Yes, sir. Let's go.
It is Miami Hate Week. I am so excited for this one. This is the funnest week of the year. I know everybody does not like Florida, me included. I don't like Florida, but man, it's just something about Miami. And I'll tell you what, that would be, I'm just ready for that one. It's going to be a wild atmosphere in Doak Campbell Stadium, especially if it's at nighttime, man. It's going to be,
man.
I just keep thinking back to that 2013 Miami game at nighttime, which was one of the most just outrageous atmospheres I've ever been to. I don't know what Miami's record was in that one, but they were pretty decent then. Florida State was obviously.
They were like, I want to say they were undefeated,
or
they had one loss. I think it was undefeated or one loss that game.
And so you're talking about kind of almost the same situation here. You're talking about undefeated Florida State that's trying to compete for something in the postseason, and then you're also talking about Miami coming in at potentially 7-2, maybe 6-3. They're going to be a little confident that they can upset you after they see you struggle against Pitt. So, man, it's going to be a fun game. Like I love that atmosphere.
Miami was undefeated. They were
really
undefeated when they came in. They were 7-0. They were ranked number 7. We were ranked number 3, and we gave them their first loss. Yeah.
So it may not be as big as far as that aspect goes, but man, it's going to be an insane atmosphere, and I cannot wait. I cannot wait for this one.
Let's go.
Yep. So I'm super excited. So we'll be back with you guys next week. Make sure to check out all the content, and then we'll get you some more details about where we're going to be and when for that Miami game. So we will see you guys down.
Make sure you guys like and subscribe this video, man. Let's get this out to more people.
Definitely do that. We sure appreciate it. We're trying to grow the channel and have a lot of content for you guys. We really enjoy doing these live streams and things like that. So thank you guys so much for tuning in.
Yes,
and we will be back with you next week. As always, hey, Florida State is 9-0.
That's right, baby.
They have stamped their ticket to Charlotte. We're going to play for an ACC championship no matter what. They can't take that from us. So got a big one next week, rivalry game against Miami. There is just so much reason to be excited and have energy right now around this FSU program. So again, thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we will catch you next week. Go Noles.
Go Noles.